Have you ever shared something personal, your pain, your plans, your love, only to feel a quiet regret afterward, like a part of you was left too exposed, too vulnerable, too open to misunderstanding? It happens more often than we admit. We long to be seen, to be understood. But in that longing, we sometimes give too much of ourselves to people who haven't earned the right to receive it. The Stoics taught that not everything should be offered to the crowd. What is sacred must be protected, not out of fear or secrecy, but out of dignity. A wise person doesn't let the world rummage through their inner life. They build quiet boundaries, not walls, but doors that open only for the worthy. Because peace is fragile when it depends on outside approval. And some wounds deepen when we try to heal them in public. This isn't about hiding, it's about honoring. There are certain things in life that lose their power when spoken too soon or to the wrong people. And if you've ever felt that quiet ache of oversharing, you know what I mean. So in this video, let's explore what the wise keep to themselves and why. No noise, no lectures, just a quiet walk through the parts of life worth protecting. Stay with me. This may change how you see silence. 1. Share from scars, not wounds. Have you ever spoken your pain out loud, hoping someone would understand, only to walk away feeling more exposed, more empty, and somehow even more alone? It's a quiet kind of regret, the kind that doesn't scream, but lingers, like handing someone your wound and watching them fumble it without care. Deep down, you knew it was too soon, but in the moment, the ache for relief felt louder than the instinct to protect yourself. The Stoics didn't believe in silence for the sake of pride. They believed in silence as a form of wisdom. As Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." What he meant wasn't to hide from life, but to live your values so deeply that they don't need explanation. And when it comes to our struggles, especially the ones that haven't yet healed, that silence becomes a kind of armor. Not to shield ourselves from connection, but to preserve the space where true strength is forged. Pain, in its early stages, is like an open wound, sensitive, vulnerable, easily aggravated by even the gentlest touch. And when we rush to speak from that wound, when we turn to the world before we've turned inward, we risk more than just awkward glances or empty advice. We risk distortion. We risk being misunderstood, minimized, or worse, used. There's something dangerously seductive about being seen as honest or vulnerable. In a world addicted to confession, sharing our wounds feels like a form of bravery. But bravery without discernment becomes self-sabotage. Not everyone has the depth to hold what you hand them. And if your struggle is still fresh, if you haven't yet looked it in the eye and learned what it came to teach, then sharing it becomes a way of escaping the lesson. A way of reaching for sympathy when what you really need is solitude. I remember a man I once knew, let's call him Thomas. After losing his job, he began posting long, emotional reflections online. He wrote about his anxiety, his fear of failure, his anger toward the system, and people responded. They offered encouragement, heart emojis, inspirational quotes. But a few weeks later, those same people began to tune out. Some judged, some mocked. A few even used his own words against him in professional circles. Thomas didn't just lose a job. He lost the quiet space he needed to rebuild because he'd invited too many eyes into his pain. His wound never closed properly, not because the injury was too deep, but because he never gave it time to scar. The Stoics would not have told him to toughen up or suppress his emotion. No. They would have reminded him that healing is a sacred act, and sacred things are not meant for display. Seneca once wrote, No one heals himself by wounding another. But we could also say, no one truly heals by exposing their wound to those who only watch, but do not walk with you. If you're going through something difficult right now, grief, failure, betrayal, take a breath. Before you tell the world, ask yourself, has the lesson revealed itself yet? Or are you still caught in the storm? Because while the storm rages, your clarity is clouded. And your story, when told prematurely, becomes fragmented. It loses its shape, and worse, its dignity. So what do the wise do? They go inward first. They sit with their struggle, not to wallow, but to understand. They choose carefully who they allow into that sacred space, a trusted friend, a mentor, someone who has suffered and endured, or sometimes no one at all. Because solitude isn't loneliness, it's the soil where self-trust grows. They don't post every tear. They don't turn their ache into a stage performance. They carry it with quiet strength until it becomes part of their foundation, not their identity. When they do speak, they speak from scar, not scab, from strength, not desperation. And in doing so, their story gains weight. It becomes not just something that happened to them, but something they overcame. That's the difference between a confession and a testimony. One seeks comfort, the other offers clarity. You don't need to justify your pain to be real. You don't need an audience to validate your suffering. And you don't owe your vulnerability to those who haven't earned your trust. Keep your wounds close until they've taught you what they came for. Let them become quiet teachers, not loud declarations. Because here's the truth. Not everyone who listens will understand, and not everyone who understands will care. But if you respect your own healing, you'll walk forward with something most people never find: inner stability that no opinion can shake. So protect your struggle while it's still sacred. Speak to it before you speak about it. And trust that the silence you choose today will build the voice you need tomorrow. Now let's talk about the second thing wise people keep to themselves, not their pain, but their plans. Because just like wounds, dreams can be bruised when revealed too soon. 2. Guard your goals until they're real. Have you ever spoken your dream out loud, only to feel the fire inside you dim a little the moment the words left your mouth? You meant to motivate yourself. You thought saying it would make it more real, but strangely, something shifted. What once felt alive and burning now feels observed, weighed, and quietly judged. It's a subtle death, the kind that comes not from failure, but from premature exposure. Marcus Aurelius warned us, the more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. And one of the most dangerous things we can place outside our control is the direction of our own ambition. You see, there's a kind of power in quiet progress, a strength in walking a path only you know exists. Because the moment you speak it to the world, it no longer belongs entirely to you. It becomes vulnerable to praise, to skepticism, to interference, and most dangerously, to your own ego's desire to be seen before it is truly ready. We live in a time where declaration is mistaken for discipline. Say it, and you're halfway there, that's what we're told. But the Stoics didn't chase halfway illusions. They believed in action, grounded in reason, in self-command, and in clarity. And announcing your goals too soon, before they've grown their own roots, is like shouting into the wind and expecting the mountain to move. I knew a young woman once, let's call her Elise. She had a deep desire to open a small cafe inspired by the writings of ancient philosophers, a place for reflection, conversation, solitude. One night, full of excitement, she told her idea to a group of acquaintances at a dinner party. At first, they smiled, nodded politely. But then came the questions, the doubts. Do people still read that stuff? You know cafes fail all the time, right? Sounds niche. Are you sure it'll work?" She laughed it off, but something inside her shifted. She went home, opened her notebook, and stared at the plans she had once been so passionate about. Suddenly, they felt childish, unrealistic. What once gave her energy now only gave her hesitation, and though she never said it out loud, she slowly stopped working on the idea. It wasn't because she wasn't capable, it was because she gave away the flame before she had built the fire strong enough to survive the wind. That's what happens when we share too early. We invite doubt into a space meant for discipline. We confuse talking about the work with doing the work. And even more quietly, we let the praise of others, however small, satisfy the very hunger that was meant to drive us. The Stoics would call this a misalignment with nature, because everything, even ambition, has its season. You don't pluck fruit in spring. You wait, you tend, you let it ripen in silence. There's another kind of danger too, the danger of performance. When too many people know your plans, your actions can begin to reflect their expectations, not your inner compass. You start doing what looks successful instead of what's necessary. You rush because people are watching. You shift direction to keep applause. And slowly, your path stops being yours. So what do the wise do? They build in silence. They guard their vision like a seed in winter, tucked away, protected from cold winds and curious hands. They share only with those who can nurture the growth, not trample it. A mentor, a partner, a trusted friend who doesn't need the details, only believes in your consistency. And when the time comes, when roots have formed and leaves begin to stretch toward the sun, only then do they let the world see. The Stoic doesn't seek external validation to legitimize their journey. They know that true work, real creation, doesn't begin with applause. It begins in solitude, in repetition, in mornings no one sees, and evenings no one praises. The reward is not in recognition, but in the alignment of effort with purpose. So if you're building something, a business, a book, a better version of yourself, resist the temptation to announce it before it's ready. Let your ambition live in silence. Let it mature in the dark. And trust that when it's time to speak, your results will say everything for you. Because real power doesn't need to declare itself. It reveals itself. Now let's move to the third and final boundary the wise keep. Perhaps the most sacred of all, their personal relationships. Not everything meaningful is meant to be shared with the world. Some connections grow stronger when protected from the noise. 3. Keep relationships out of the spotlight. Have you ever felt something real begin to lose its depth the moment you put it on display? A connection that once felt sacred slowly starts to feel observed, picked apart by comments, opinions, or silent eyes you never invited in. It's subtle at first. You post a picture, a moment, a gesture. But then it begins. The assumptions, the unsolicited advice, the questions that weren't asked in love but in curiosity, and without meaning to, you start measuring intimacy by how it's received, not how it's lived. In a world obsessed with sharing, privacy becomes an act of quiet rebellion. The Stoics knew this long before our generation ever put their lives on public timelines. Seneca wrote, "A happy life is one which is in accordance with its own nature." And what is natural to love, to friendship, to family, if not the privacy in which it grows strong without needing approval? When you expose your relationships to the crowd, you invite voices that have no stake in your well-being. People begin to assume a role they were never given. They comment on your closeness. They speculate on your distance. They inject opinions you never asked for. And suddenly, your connection is no longer yours alone. It becomes shared, but not in the intimate sense. Shared like a stage is shared by an audience. everyone watching, few understanding. I once met a man named Jonah. He was newly married, full of joy, and eager to celebrate the love he had waited years to find. At first, he posted the smiles, the travels, the quiet victories. But the more he shared, the more the outside world felt entitled to weigh in. "Why aren't you two having kids yet? You seemed happier last year. Is everything okay between you two?" And with every message, every unsolicited opinion, his once private joy began to fray. Not because his love was failing, but because it was being stretched between too many eyes. One day he told me, "It's not that our love changed, it's that it got louder out there and quieter in here." He gestured to his chest. We forgot how to just be us again. Relationships, whether romantic or familial or deeply personal, do not thrive in exposure. They thrive in the warmth of trust, in the soft corners of conversation, in the silences that don't need to be filled. And when you place them on display too often, you risk turning them into performances. Instead of growing roots, they chase applause. Instead of becoming deeper, they become curated. The Stoic way is not to hide what you love, but to protect it. Not because you're afraid of losing it, but because you recognize its sacredness. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. And so too, the things you allow others to speak into, your mind, your relationships, your soul, must be chosen with great care. So what does that look like in practice? It looks like choosing quiet over spectacle. It looks like telling your story not to strangers online, but to those who have walked through seasons with you. It means you don't owe explanations for your closeness or your distance. You don't need to prove loyalty with pictures or love with public declarations. The people who truly matter already know the truth of your heart, and those who demand to see more usually don't deserve the access they're asking for. So, choose to share less. Choose to be deeply connected, not widely known. Choose to honor what is real, even if no one ever sees it. And if you've ever felt the weight of letting too many people into something precious, let this be your reminder. You have the right to close the door, not in anger, but in wisdom. If this message speaks to something you've lived through, type a simple comment. Protect what's sacred. And if you'd like to walk more of this journey with us, feel free to subscribe. No pressure, just a quiet invitation. Now, let's bring everything together. Because privacy is not just about what we keep to ourselves. It's about how we live, with intention, with clarity, and with an inner strength that doesn't rely on the eyes of others. You see, not everything sacred needs to be seen. What grows quietly often grows deepest. And the discipline to protect your inner life, the parts no one claps for, isn't just about love or connection. It's about you. Because the moment you stop needing to be seen, you begin to become unshakable. That's where we begin the next chapter, where silence becomes your strategy and your strength no longer needs an audience. 1. Strength that doesn't need to be seen. Have you ever walked into a room and said nothing, yet felt that everyone could feel you? Not because you tried to stand out, but because you carried something that couldn't be faked. A calm weight, a quiet certainty. That is invisible strength. It's the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention, but commands it. The kind that isn't worn like a costume, but carried like a discipline. And in a world obsessed with making everything visible, it may be the rarest kind of power left. The Stoics taught that real strength is not in force, but in mastery of the self. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery isn't something you prove by shouting it. It's something that becomes evident when you don't need to, when you speak less, when you respond slower, when your worth is no longer tangled up in how much noise you can make. In our time, it's easy to confuse strength with visibility. People think being loud is being bold, that posting every detail is being authentic, that reacting quickly is being powerful, but the Stoic doesn't rush to prove anything, because what's proven can be taken back. What's felt doesn't need an argument. That's why invisible strength is so unshakable. It doesn't come from the world, it comes from within. There was a woman I once met, Elena. She worked in a high-pressure law firm. Most people there were performers. They cut each other down with words, competed for recognition, and lived off the adrenaline of being seen. But Elena was different. She wasn't flashy. She didn't stay late to impress. She didn't speak unless she had something worth saying. And when she did speak, people listened. Not because she demanded the room, but because her words always carried weight. I asked her once why she didn't try harder to stand out, and she smiled. "I'd rather be underestimated and steady than noticed and hollow," she said. "My job is to know who I am when the doors close, not just when the lights are on." Over the years, promotions came and went. Colleagues burned out. Some crashed from their own ambition. Elena stayed. She rose slowly but firmly, not through networking events or self-marketing, but through consistent, quiet excellence. Her work spoke long after the noise had faded. That is invisible strength. And it isn't just for career paths. It applies to everything. It's the father who teaches not by yelling, but by example. It's the friend who doesn't need to prove their loyalty because it's already felt. It's the builder who lays brick after brick in silence while others chase applause. The Stoics weren't interested in short bursts of greatness. They sought steady virtue. They believed that the strength that lasts is the one no one sees until it's tested. That's why they trained not for approval, but for difficulty, not for popularity, but for principle. And when you live that way, something shifts inside you. You stop needing to show off your progress. You stop arguing about your values. You stop chasing the illusion of recognition. You just do the work, quietly, firmly, repeatedly. Because the true power of invisible strength is that it gives you freedom. Freedom from noise, freedom from validation, freedom from reacting every time someone misunderstands you. You don't have to announce your growth. You don't have to defend your boundaries. You don't have to decorate your discipline. You just live it. And that, over time, becomes undeniable. So if you're building in silence right now, if you feel like no one sees your efforts, your consistency, your restraint, don't be discouraged. That's where the real foundation is being laid, not in the echo of likes or the spotlight of opinion, but in the unseen layers of who you are becoming. Invisible strength doesn't shine under a spotlight. It doesn't perform. It doesn't crave reaction. It builds in quiet, waits with patience, and speaks only when it must. And when it does, everyone listens. And from this stillness, from this quiet discipline, we begin to see a new kind of value, not based on exposure, but on presence. So let's take it one step further. Because the fewer times you show up, the more those moments begin to mean. Let's talk about how absence, when chosen wisely, becomes your shield. 2. Use absence to elevate value. Have you ever stepped away from a room and returned to find that your silence had said more than your presence ever could? There's a strange kind of clarity that shows up in your absence. Who noticed? Who respected it? Who filled the space with noise? And who waited with grace? The things that are truly valuable in this life, your presence, your peace, your attention, do not grow in worth because they're always available. They grow in value when they're offered with discernment. That's the forgotten truth in a world that worships constant exposure. Absence doesn't always mean neglect. Sometimes it's how we protect what matters. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "Withdraw into yourself." The rationale principle which rules has this nature, that it is content with itself when it does what is just. He wasn't praising isolation. He was defending inner sovereignty, the right to step away, to preserve your center, and to let your silence carry weight without explanation. The world will always ask for more of you, but the Stoic knows that giving everything is not generosity, it's erosion. And erosion doesn't make you noble, it makes you hollow. Let's take a step back. Think of gold. Not the polished ring, not the chain, but the raw metal hidden deep underground. People don't stumble upon gold easily. It's buried, protected, untouched by light for centuries. And that's what makes it precious. If it were scattered in every street, laying openly in every field, its meaning would vanish. Its value isn't in how often it's seen, it's in how carefully it's revealed. The same is true of your presence. When you make yourself constantly available, always responsive, always explaining, always present, you turn your value into a commodity. And the tragedy is that you don't even notice it because you think you're being kind, you think you're being reliable, you think you're building connection, but what you're actually building is fatigue. Your time becomes something people expect, not something they earn. Your energy becomes a faucet that can't be turned off, and soon your silence feels unnatural, even to yourself. There was a young artist I once knew, Daniel. Brilliant, thoughtful, always helping, always replying. He believed being accessible would open doors, and for a while it did. People praised him. He got messages at midnight, requests, invitations, endless calls for his time and presence. But slowly he started to feel exhausted. Not because he didn't love his work, but because he had made himself too available. He told me one evening, "I've trained people to treat me like I have no door, just an open hallway." And so he began to pull back, not out of bitterness, but out of necessity. He stopped responding immediately. He deleted his online schedule. He began working quietly, alone. Weeks passed. Some complained, some disappeared. But something strange began to happen. The few who remained, the ones who didn't demand, who didn't expect, started treating his presence with more reverence, more gratitude, and most importantly, Daniel began to feel whole again. His silence had reset the room, and in doing so, it reset his worth, not in the eyes of others, but in his own. You see, we forget that rarity increases reverence. The Stoics understood this instinctively. They believed that what is common becomes overlooked, and what is always spoken becomes noise. So they practiced restraint not just in speech, but in presence. Seneca put it simply, "Nothing is so honorable as a grateful heart." But how can others be grateful for what you offer if you never step away long enough for them to feel the absence? Letting your absence speak is not manipulation, it is a boundary. And boundaries, in Stoic terms, are about living in alignment with nature, where everything has its season, its rhythm, its moment. The sun rises and sets, the tide comes in, then pulls back. Nature doesn't apologize for its pauses. It simply understands that what is constant becomes invisible. So how do you apply this? You begin by recognizing where you've made yourself too easy to reach, where people feel entitled to your attention, not honored by it, where you give out explanations as a reflex and show up before being asked. You pause, you listen, you step back, and not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You choose silence where noise was expected, stillness where reaction was assumed. You let the people who truly see you come closer, and those who only wanted access drift away. And you don't chase, because what's real won't vanish when you retreat. It will hold, it will wait, and it will rise in your return. Absence is not a retreat from life. It is a return to yourself, to the still, unshaken ground that doesn't bend to pressure or performance. It is in that absence that you remember who you are without the mirrors, without the feedback, without the noise. And when you finally return, you bring more than just your presence. You bring clarity, depth, value, because you didn't give yourself away in pieces. You protected your wholeness, and in doing so, reminded others and yourself what it means to truly matter. Now, from this sacred discipline of holding back, there's one final principle, perhaps the most important of all. It is not about what the world sees or hears. It is about how you live when no one is watching. The audience that truly matters is not out there. It is within, and it watches every choice. Let's go there next. 3. Live for the inner audience. Have you ever caught yourself justifying your decisions in your own head, explaining what you did, why you did it, as if someone were listening, as if there were a silent crowd somewhere waiting to judge your every move? We all do it. We imagine how others will see us, how they'll interpret our silence, our choices, our boundaries. And in that invisible courtroom, we plead our case before anyone even asks a question. But what if the only audience that truly mattered was already inside you? The Stoics believed there is a higher version of the self, a part of you that watches quietly every time you act, every time you speak, every time you stay silent. Marcus Aurelius called it the ruling reason. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," and in that single sentence is a reminder that how others behave should never dictate how we respond. Because your life is not a stage, it's a training ground. And the only witness that counts is the part of you that knows the difference between performance and principle. We spend so much energy trying to be seen in a good light, crafting images, explaining our intentions, correcting misunderstandings. But the wise person doesn't live to avoid being misread. They live to avoid being misaligned. Epictetus said it clearly: if you want to be good, assume that you are already being watched. Not by people, by your own conscience, your reason, your integrity. That is the true audience. I once heard the story of a man named Silas. He worked in a place where politics and performance were the norm. Those who bragged the loudest rose fastest. Those who whispered behind backs gained influence. But Silas moved differently. He showed up early, stayed late, but never competed for attention. He never corrected the lies told about him, never pushed to be seen. And when others asked how he tolerated the injustice, he said, "Because I know who's watching." When pressed further, he said, "Not them, me, and that's enough." Years later, the ones who fought for applause burned out. The ones who manipulated their way to the top collapsed under their own weight. But Silas remained, not because he played the game well, but because he never played it. He lived by his own law, and that law was simple: live as if your soul was the one keeping score. The inner audience rule is brutal because it cannot be fooled. It doesn't care about applause. It doesn't care about image. It doesn't care whether your silence was misunderstood or your truth ignored. It only asks, did you act with integrity? Did you uphold your standard? Did you remain unmoved by praise and insult alike? And this isn't some abstract moral idea. It's the very foundation of freedom, because when you live by the eyes of others, you become their prisoner. You hand them the strings. They pull and you react. They criticize and you explain. They doubt and you overcompensate. You become like a puppet, sensitive, exhausted, hollow. But when you live by your inner standard, that all begins to fall away. You stop needing to post your progress. You stop needing to be understood. You stop arguing with people who never deserved your time. Why? Because your aim is no longer to be right in their eyes. It's to be whole in your own. You are not performing. You are practicing. And you are practicing for a judge that already knows the full context, your intentions, your struggles, your sacrifices. The part of you that knows everything, especially the parts you hide. And here's the truth. If your inner self respects your silence, the world has no power to misinterpret you. If your conscience is clear, no slander can stain you. If your motives are anchored in virtue, no insult can move you from your path. So what do you do practically? You slow down. You pause before reacting. You ask yourself not, will they like me, but will I respect myself after this? You stop chasing resolution with people who thrive on confusion. You stop defending your boundaries to those who have already shown they will not honor them. And when the moment comes to speak or to stay silent, you choose based on what preserves your peace, not what proves your point. And when doubt creeps in, as it always will, you remind yourself of this. The people who see your depth may be few, but they are enough. And even if no one sees it, even if the whole world misunderstands you, the part of you that matters, the soul, the reason, the inner audience knows. And that's where peace begins. Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them twist your absence into arrogance, your silence into guilt, your dignity into distance. You don't need to explain what was never meant for their understanding. Because in the end, a life well lived doesn't echo through the applause of crowds. It resonates in the quiet chambers of a conscience at peace. And that, more than image or clarity or control, is the highest reward. Live in such a way that if your life was stripped of all its explanations, it would still stand, quiet, steady, true, not for them, for you. Protect your pain while it's still healing. Guard your dreams while they're still growing. Keep your relationships safe from the noise while they're still finding their roots. This isn't secrecy, it's self-respect. It's the quiet wisdom of those who know that not everything sacred should be exposed. Privacy is not about hiding, it's about holding space for what matters most, to mature without pressure. When you keep your inner world protected, you're not shutting people out. You're allowing truth, love, and clarity to deepen in silence. You don't need an audience to validate your progress. You don't owe anyone your wounds, your plans, or your heart before they're ready. The strongest things in life often grow where no one is watching. So if you've ever felt torn between being open and being safe, let this be your reminder. You have the right to keep some things for yourself. That is not weakness, that is power. If this spoke to your current season, drop a simple comment. Guard the sacred. And if you feel called to continue this journey with us, feel free to subscribe. No pressure. In the next video, we'll dive deeper into what it means to live with quiet conviction and speak with purpose. Until then, keep what matters close.